Hello everyone, so in this video we're going to take a look at German cases. In the first part of the video I'll describe what cases are, explain how they work, and then in the second half of the video I will look at some examples from the Leaving Cert papers. Now, the question a lot of people ask right at the start is, what are cases? Why are there cases in German grammar? And the best way I can think of describing cases is as modes. So sometimes if you buy a new car these days, the car will have three different modes in it. So the car might have, for example, a sport mode, and it might have an eco mode, it might have an off-road mode, and it might have a normal mode. So the car would probably usually be in normal mode, and then if you put the car in sport mode, it might go a little bit faster. If you put it in eco mode, it might save a bit more fuel. If you put it in off-road mode, then it might respond a little bit better to off-road terrain. Cases really just describe the way that a noun acts in a sentence, what job it has. And just like modes, a noun can only be in one case at a time. But a noun can also change from one mode to the other depending on the job that it does in the sentence. So, for example, in normal mode, it's der Mann, but we know that when the man is in the accusative mode, let's just say the off-road mode, then it becomes den Mann, which is D-E-N, and then when it's in dative, it's dem Mann, which is D-E-M, and then finally when it's in genitive, it's des Mannes. So that's just one way of thinking about it, and remember those 2 points, that a noun can change from one mode to another, but at any one point in time, a noun is only in one mode or one case. Now, when it comes to explaining how cases work, there's a way that I found is the simplest and the clearest way of explaining it, and that is by writing out a sentence with all 4 cases in it and then looking at that sentence or analysing that sentence. So let's do that now. Der Mann gibt der Frau, and then it's all one sentence, but let's go to the next line. Den Schlüssel des Hauses. Okay, so looking at this sentence, the first thing we want to establish is where the verb is. And the verb is clearly here, it's gibt. So let's just put 2 lines under gibt and put V above it. Because when it comes to cases, we're always just talking about nouns. Verbs have pretty much nothing to do with cases for the purposes of this exercise. Now we want to look at the 4 different nouns in the sentence. So when we look here, we can see that there are 4 nouns, and let's circle them. So the first one is der Mann, that's one noun. The second is der Frau. The third is den Schlüssel, and the fourth is des Hauses. Now I haven't yet translated this sentence, so let's do that for starters. And it's the man gives the lady the key of the house. And we're going to take a look at the role that each of these nouns plays and why they play that role. So before we get stuck into it, let's just change our pen back and look at the genders of these words. So der Mann is a masculine word, so let's just put an or here and put a bracket around it. We know that woman is normally a feminine word, so it's normally die Frau. We know that Schlüssel is normally a masculine word, so that's der Schlüssel. And we know that house is das Haus, so let's just put an S around that. Now, when we look at this sentence, we can see here there are 4 nouns, and each of them are in different cases. And what it's good to understand first is what job the noun does in English. So when we look at this first noun, we see that the man is giving the key. And the word for that in English is that the man is the subject of the sentence. So let's just write subject under this. So here we have the subject of the sentence. And the subject is the doer of the action. So you could also write underneath that it's the doer of the action. And the word for this case in German, so this mode that a noun might be in, is the nominative. So I'm going to write that in block capitals over the man, so that is nominative. So we say that the man is in the nominative case. Then we move on to what the man gives. So if you look at the action here, the man is giving, and you ask yourself, what does the man give, or what is being given in the sentence? Now we know that the man is not giving the lady, instead the man is giving the key. And this in English is called the object or the direct object, as it's sometimes called, of the sentence. And this is what receives the action. So we say that the key is the receiver of the action. And the name for this case in German is the accusative case. So we can write that. Let's just sneak that in again over the noun. So we can say here the Accusative. I'm spelling this in German this time, the Accusative. That is den Schlüssel. And if we look here, we can see that the Schlüssel is now not der Schlüssel, it's den Schlüssel. And this is what I call the German passport. There's a handout on my website which has this laid out very, very clearly, how the definite articles, the der, die, das, die, change as you go from the nominative to the accusative to the dative and finally to the genitive. And you absolutely need to know that for exams. It's a very good idea to learn that off at the earliest stage possible in your German learning journey. It will save you so much time as you go on. So here we see that der Mann has changed, or the der has changed to den in the accusative. Now, then if we look back at the lady, we see that what is the role of the lady in the sentence? And the lady answers the question, to whom or for whom is the action being done? So that's always a nice way to remember that. It's like a little hack, if you will. So to whom or for whom is the action being done? And we call this in English the indirect object. The indirect object, and it's what answers the question, to whom is the key being given? Well, the key has been given to the lady, the indirect object. And this case in German is called the dative case, Dative. This is called the dative case. We say that the lady is in the dative case, and therefore die Frau changes then to der Frau. Finally, we come to des Hauses, and this is probably the least common German case and the trickiest one, and this is where you're saying that it's the key of the house. And in German, the of is often dropped, and instead you just have the des Hauses. And a way of describing that in English is that it's the possessive. It really carries the idea of the key belonging to the house. It's the key of the house. But German is very economical as a language. It leaves out the of, and just by the case shows that it's possessive. So we would call this case in German the genitive case. The genitive case. So here are the four cases: nominative, accusative, dative and genitive. And this explains in some form how each of those can appear in a sentence, and each of those are a type of mode that a noun would be in a sentence. So questions on cases often come up in the Leaving Certificate, and they came up in 2020, and in this case the question showed a list of nouns underlined, and the student had to answer and say whether they were singular or plural, if they were singular what the gender was, and then finally the case. So let's look at that and do it now. The first one here says, am letzten Schultag bekam ich mein Zeugnis. Now when you're answering these questions, it's always extremely important, first of all, to write out the word again. So here we have the word Schultag. So simply write that word out again and put 2 dots beside it. The first thing we have to do is to say, it's also a good idea to, when you're looking at these, just to look at the context of the word. So here we can see Schultag, it's am letzten Schultag bekam ich mein Zeugnis. Now this little phrase means on the last school day. And when you look at this word, you would need to know that it is one school day, so this makes it a singular instead of 2 or 3 days. Then if we look back at this little word am always takes the dative case in German. The preposition an, always takes the dative case. So we know here that it's dative, and if you know the gender of day, you know that it was masculine. So it's masculine and then finally dative. And it's always good to put them in that order: singular, masculine, and then dative. The second one says, gestern stand ich mit meinem gepackten Rucksack vor meinen Eltern. So here again you have a sentence like this, and again you have a little preposition here, which is vor. Now prepositions come up a lot when you're studying cases, and really there are a few different groups of prepositions that follow rules around cases. So for example, some prepositions like für always take the accusative. That means the noun that follows them will always be in the accusative case. And some prepositions always take the dative, some prepositions always take the genitive, and some prepositions are changeable and they take either the accusative or the dative depending on the context. Now when we look at vor here, this is one of those changeable ones. But if you look at the context, it says, yesterday I stood with my packed rucksack in front of my parents. And in this case, the context shows that the person was standing in front of their parents. There was no movement, and so it's in the dative case. So we would write out the word eltern. We would say here that it's die Eltern, so it's plural. And we know also that when it's plural, you don't need to give whether it's singular or whether, it's feminine, masculine, or neutral. So we can simply say here that it is dative. The next one, meine Mutter stellte erstaunt ihre Kaffeetasse hin. So here it's speaking about the mother putting down her coffee cup in amazement. So really here you just have quite a simple sentence. You have the verb here in the middle, stellte, and the mother puts down her coffee cup. So here the mother is doing the action and the coffee cup is the receiver of the action. And so we say simply that the coffee cup is in the accusative case, Kaffeetasse. Now we know that it's one coffee cup because it's not the plural of the noun, so it's singular. We know that it's die Tasse. If you look at the ending there, ihre, you know that it's die Tasse, so that's feminine. And we know that it's simply accusative. So it's nice where possible if you can spell in the German. On to the next one. Bevor mein Vater reagierte konnte, redete ich weiter. Now here we have a little sentence really, and it's my father could react. Mein Vater könnte reagieren. So when we look at this, we really have the father could. So the father is the doer of the action. So we write out Vater. It's one father, so it's singular. It's masculine. And the father is the doer of the action, so it's nominative. And finally the last one. Ich wollte Paulus treffen, dessen genaue Adresse ich aber nicht kannte. So here we have a sentence and you just look at the second part after the comma. And the person is saying, I did not know the address, the exact address. I did not know the exact address. So again, I is doing the action and the receiver of the action is the address. It's the thing that wasn't known, the address. So here we'd simply write out Adresse. It's one address, so it's singular. It's feminine if you look at the adjective endings. And it's in the accusative. So that's 2020. Now if you look back at 2017, we see that this exercise came up again, but here it's slightly different. Here the article rather than the noun is underlined, and this doesn't really make much difference. You follow all of the same rules and you adopt the same approach. So the first one here says, als Mitglied des Buchclubs bekam viermal im Jahr einen Katalog. And here you can see the des is underlined. Now if you know the German passport that I was referring to earlier, that's on my website handles.ie, you'll know that des is always the genitive. So if we write this out, we can just write out here des, des. What it's saying here is as a member of the book club. So he was a member of the book club. So we look at the word Buchclubs and we know that it's singular. He was only a member of one book club, so you'd have to know that it wasn't the plural. You'd have to notice that it was the genitive. We know that book club is masculine, and we know that the case is genitive. Then on to the next one. So here we have Elvira tippte Reihen von Zahlen in den Computer. So here we just look at that little phrase, in den Computer. Again, here we have a preposition, in, and Elvira is typing rows of numbers into the computer. So there is movement there, and for that reason, in takes the accusative. So again, we write out we're very careful to be neat, we write out den, D-E-N. We know that it's one computer, so it's singular. We know that computer is a masculine word, so we say masculine. And we know that it's the accusative case. because she's typing into the computer. There's movement. And a handy little rhyme to remember that is just the word drama, which is dative at rest and accusative at motion always. So this means that if there's rest in the sentence, with these changeable prepositions, if there's rest, if she was sitting in the room and she wasn't moving in and out of it, then you use the dative case. But if there's movement and you're moving in and out of the room or typing into the computer, then it's the accusative. So dative at rest, accusative at motion always. Then we move on to the third one. Als Markus von der Arbeit kam. So again we have a little phrase here with a preposition in it, just like the previous one, von. And von is a different type of preposition. It always takes the dative. So here you could write out der again. You'd have to know here that it's die Arbeit, and it's one job that he has. So it's singular, it's feminine, and it's dative. And again, it's always very helpful to learn off those long, or not very long, those lists of prepositions that take the dative. Finally, number 4, so der Regen trommelte gegen die Scheiben. So the rain drums against the window panes. Here, this is quite simple. Rain is at the start of the sentence. It's doing the action, so it's singular, masculine, and it's nominative because it's doing the action here. And finally, the last one, we have Markus legte die Hände auf den kalten Marmor. So Martin lays his hands on the cold marble. Here Markus is doing the action and the hands are the receivers of the action. So we'd say simply here that it's die Hände, so it's plural. And when plurals are involved, you don't need to speak about the gender of hand. You just put a dash and you say that it's the accusative. So that brings us to the end of that paper. So in 2015 we're back to nouns again, and the first sentence says Lisbeth hat im Seniorenheim eine eigene Wohnung. So here we just have the Wohnung, eine eigene Wohnung. So again you write out the noun, which is Wohnung here. Now the sentence means Lisbeth had in the old people's home her own apartment. So here it's quite simple. The apartment is the accusative, it's the object. Lisbeth is the doer of the action, the object is the receiver of the action. So you say simply here that it's singular, it's feminine, and it's accusative. The next one, once einmal in ihrem Leben möchte sie richtig fliegen. So einmal in ihrem Leben möchte sie richtig fliegen. So here we just write out the word Leben. This is our noun. Now if you look closely here, you'll see that there's a preposition here, in, and it's in her life. So it's the dative. There's no movement, just in her life. So it's singular. And you'd have to know here that it's das Leben, so that's neutrum. And it's dative. Moving on to number 3, ihre Enkelin schickt einen Scheck. So we're just concerned with this clause here, and it's the Enkelin is doing the action. So we simply write out the noun. It's singular. It's granddaughter, so it's feminine. And it's nominative, because she is doing the action. Moving on to the next one. Nach mehreren Telefonaten hat die Erzählerin einen Flug organisiert. So after several phone calls, the narrator had organized a flight. Now here again we have a preposition, nach, and nach is one of those prepositions that always takes the dative case. So writing out the noun, which again here is telefonaten. Now this time it's plural, so it's telephone calls. So write out the plural. We know that we don't need to specify what the gender of the noun is, and because it's plural, and then we just note the case, which is dative. And finally we have this nice little phrase, am Tag des Geburtstags steht Lisbeths Name in der Zeitung. So here we see that it's the day, and here we have the des here. And if you know your cases chart, you know that des is genitive always. So we can write out Geburtstags, and looking closely at this sentence we can see that it means on the day of the birthday. So we know here that it's singular, it's one birthday. We know that it's der Tag, so that's masculine. And finally we know that it's genitive. So hope this video was of some benefit to you in learning about cases and in mastering cases when it comes to exam questions. I would recommend that you try the 2014 exam question, which is also a question on cases, and hopefully you'll find some success as you apply those rules. Hope you found this video useful again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.